stepping outside to take a look around. Take a look around at your surroundings. What are your obstacles? I've got 9 or 10 warm bodies here that I've got to protect. I've got power lines I don't want to get mixed up with. I once flew through those ropes during a demonstration and it didn't end well, so I'm not going over there. More power lines. There's a mockingbird in that tree that hates my guts. I know these things. I know the extent of my property. I know where I can fly, where I can't fly. I know it's about 68 degrees outside, sunny. It was sprinkling on my way in, which tells me it might sprinkle again. I need to be prepared for that because if I feel rain droplets, the aircraft are not waterproof. They're electric. They don't like water, especially non-purified water. Well, which one can argue rain is not, but whatnot. We don't want to get mixed up with it. So we want to know these things. And then we want to know, what do our motors sound like on our particular aircraft? Well, I know they have bearings. Should I hear click, click, click of a bearing? No. I've got 4 indicator lights underneath the aircraft. I need to know what they mean. And if I'm seeing any kind of error code present, I need to know the status of my battery, how long I can stay in the air, make sure I'm on a full charge. And then we power up the aircraft and we go through a different series of pre-flight checks based upon that. So, our first aircraft. This, let me get a gimbal lock off here, is the Phantom 2 Vision Plus. This is the latest and greatest aircraft from DJI on the consumer level, beginner to intermediate level. This aircraft has a 3-axis gimbal. What that means is no matter which way the aircraft moves, because X, Y, and Z axes are covered, the camera is going to stay still and give you a nice still image or a nice stabilized shot so that you can get some really fine looking video. Now, it's beginner to intermediate level because this is an integrated system. Out of the box, this is almost exactly the way it comes. We put some better motors on here so it'll last through our demonstration days for as long as possible. But this camera gimbal can be sensitive, so that's why on the intermediate level, you want to know how to fly this probably without the camera being attached for a little bit and then put it on as you get to be a better flyer. This camera can become damaged pretty quickly, and it's a $679 replacement.
Yes.
And we replace a lot of them. So, and that's because it has this ribbon cable. It's exposed and runs through, and the joints just aren't all that strong. So, things to be aware of there, yes. But it is a good system for us, especially whenever we get you behind the sticks. If you haven't flown before, you're going to be flying this one. And we'll show you just how easy it is. So, first and foremost, we get a battery. We check the battery. All 4 lights are lit. It means I've got 100%, supposedly, theoretically. Now, this aircraft does transmit video and what it's seeing, FPV, first-person view, to the ground, but it doesn't do so with a fancy monitor like this with weird antenna. It's actually going to go to a smartphone.
Yep.
And it does that via this Wi-Fi range extender right here. Now, I always get a lot of questions. People say, well, what if I'm in an area that doesn't have Wi-Fi or cellular?
So
That's not what it's doing. It's building its own Wi-Fi network. It's a VPN, a virtual private network, which is between this ad hoc through this device with the aircraft. It's a 3-part situation. Well, can somebody else see what I'm doing? No. If another user tries to connect to the system, the entire system goes out and nobody has access because it is OFDM Wi-Fi based. So the reason I have this tablet is I'm going to pass this around to you guys so you can see what the aircraft sees as we're flying once we get started up. Now, this controller is probably the most basic RC controller that has ever been developed. It doesn't even have trim settings. It doesn't have fancy buttons and switches everywhere.
No labels.
It is very, very minimalistic, unlike that 14-channel Futaba that I have over there. And this does very simple things. Our left stick, unless we reverse it, if you're left-handed versus right-handed, I'm left-handed, I use this standard, so I'm going to just describe it standard. Our left stick is going to govern throttle, first and foremost. Down and up, that means motors power down, motors power up. Up is going to give you ascension, down is going to descend. You never want to descend at 100% rate because this is also the key by which you shut off the motors. You hold this for 5 seconds. If you're at altitude and you held it for 5 seconds, down comes birdie. Left and right govern yaw. Yaw, a lot of people don't typically understand. If you're not in the hobby RC enthusiast world or whatnot, or if you haven't flown an aircraft, yaw is imagine an axis running through the middle of this and rotate based upon that. That's what yaw is. So left and right is going to change which way the aircraft is facing on here. Our right stick is all about our pitch and roll. That's just which way the aircraft is going to move. It's not going to change the way it's facing. It'll move forward in direction of camera, rear towards battery, left towards port, right towards starboard. But basically this is just pitch control. It's just going to pitch the aircraft in one of those 4 directions and it's going to go in that direction. Yes, you can do collective controls. You can fly these aircraft pretty fancily if you like. You can even turn off all the safety presets if you wanted to and make the aircraft do loop-de-loops. I don't recommend it. It freaks out the processor, and that's one way to get that $679 gimbal replacement happening pretty fast. Wi-Fi range extender, phone clip for our device, and power right here. These toggle switches natively are only going to do one thing. Now, there are advanced modes. There's a way that you can make this aircraft do a lot of cool stuff, especially for cinema. That's very advanced. We're probably not going to go into that much today. That's for more of a one-on-one type thing. So natively, this left switch doesn't do anything. This right switch, however, this is going to activate a couple of key things natively right out of the box. And yes, you can still make some changes to this. First and foremost, we toggle the switch after a few seconds of the aircraft being on to calibrate our compass. Also, if the aircraft, we lose connection with it and it goes into fail-safe mode, which is where it'll do the return home by itself, land itself, shut itself off. If we already see it coming and it's like, okay, now I know where it is, toggle switch 2 or 3 times, aircraft will stop and you're back in control of it. It's not going to come in and do the auto landing. And we'll describe that a little bit more as we show that show that feature in use. But that's it. That's all this is going to do. Everything else with these switches you have to program. And there are plenty of uses, there are plenty of things you can change, but this is how your aircraft is going to come out of the box. Unless you get an S-Tune system. This fancy little S-Tune sticker, that's something new that we're doing. All of us technicians got together and said, you know what, let's sell a little bit more high performance version. Let's change out motors, let's change out props, let's get some different things going on these aircraft, and let's sell a pro-tuned system that's already ready to go for a pro. Not necessarily a beginner, definitely not a beginner, but one that's ready to go for a pro. We can set up a system to be that way, and natively all of your switches will work. Get with one of us, we'll talk about that after class, because that is something that I wouldn't want somebody who's never flown one of these to have their controller set for, because all it takes is just a little knock it into something and the aircraft flies completely different, and you think it has a problem. No, you just switched modes, that's all. So, alright, less blabber, more flying. First thing we want to do is make sure our battery is not like that. Even if you have to give it a little bit of a punch, you want to make a nice clean seam around here. And I'll show you why. There are these 2 little tiny gold contacts that are spring-based right there. And those are the sensor. Those all connect to a sensor that are going to tell the aircraft how much battery capacity is remaining. If you don't have good contact with that, at any point in the flight, the aircraft might think that it dipped below 15% power and will start auto-descending. It means landing wherever it is. Thousands of feet away or right on top of your head, that's where it's going to land. So, first thing we want to do, I removed that gimbal lock, setting it aside, giving myself some space to fly. This is important, and I'll explain why in a minute, but the first thing you turn on and the last thing you turn off after every flight, power. This gets turned on first, this gets turned off last. Power up our Wi-Fi range extender, and then we come over and power on the aircraft. I get so many calls about this where somebody just goes, it didn't turn on. Why isn't it turning on?
Yeah, hold it for a second.
It is press and hold and wait for it. Now it's on. 5 calls a day. Those are the fun calls. So, what's going to happen right now, it's nice that we don't have too much sunlight out here for this, Notice how the rear two lights of the aircraft are blinking yellow right now. What that means is stay the F away, let it do what it's doing, and what it's doing is two things. That IMU that I told you about, the inertial measurement unit that tells the aircraft how to stay level, that has to heat up to a certain operating temperature for the aircraft to fly effectively. So leave it alone, let it warm up. Secondly, it's counting GPS. GPS is an interesting thing in the way that it works. What we have are these geosynchronous positioning satellites that fly both equatorial and subequatorial, about 150 to 250 miles above our heads. And all they do is they go, this is the time, this is the time, this is the time. And they're all supposed to be synced on the same time, but time codes take a certain amount of time via the speed of light to reach the ground. And GPS pucks literally just listen for those differences and say, okay, I must be here on latitude, longitude. And in order to get accuracy based upon that, you have to have multiple satellites, as many as you can. These aircraft will not fly effectively or accurately if you have less than 6 satellites that you're connected to. That is the minimum. If you have less than 6, be prepared to fly in a very manual experience where the aircraft drifts until you counter that, and then if you counter that too far, it's like an oversteer, understeer situation. You can crash pretty effectively. So, if you do not have any flight experience whatsoever, and you want to get one of these systems, but you're still a little bit hesitant after this class, I want you to drive to Fry's, or Radio Shack, or Walmart, I don't care where you go, Hobbytown, USA, and I want you to get a $50 aircraft that you can chase the cats and the kids with. It's fun to do both, and what's really interesting about those systems is they don't have GPS. You can fly them in the house, you can fly them wherever you want. They are difficult as hell to fly. But if you get good at flying one of those, you'll always be able to fly one of these, both when times are good and when times are bad because you've lost GPS. That is one way to basically give yourself a little bit of an insurance policy. So, aircraft is now blinking green. Green means good. Green means all things good, but it gives me no indication about GPS. It could just have 7 satellites that it's connected to right now. We won't know until we start up our app on this particular system. We have other ways with different aircraft. So what I'm going to do here is that's upside down. That's a problem. Alright, so I'm connected already to the aircraft. You have to actually go in and select the network before it's connected, but in this case it's already being kind to me. I'm just going to select camera. And now I can see what the aircraft sees. I'm rotating the camera up. We have the ability to take pictures and video. Ooh, only 6 satellites. So our experience with this particular aircraft today could be a little bit interesting, but we are going to go ahead and take off. It's going to give us information here about our battery percentage, the battery on the Wi-Fi range extender, but this is a live look, and I'm going to pass this around to all of y'all. Warn me if it says 5 satellites at any point.
Don't we have to set the GPS on that?
We're going to do the compass calibration. Okay. That is the very next thing. Okay. So, DJI, as well as many dealers, as well as a lot of other people, are going to tell you, oh yeah, calibrating the compass, I'll just do that anytime, you know, you're 25 miles away from the last place you flew. That's BS. Calibrate your compass before every freaking flight. And the reason for that is that electromagnetic compass, which is the little silver thing that's right here on the cuff of that leg. It's basically a magnet. What messes up magnets? No, I don't know. Other magnets, maybe metal. That's magnetic. If that gets screwy, the aircraft has no idea which way to move. You can have all the GPS in the world that you want. You could be connected to 30 satellites, and you might know your exact lat-long position. But how do you know how to go from that position to another one autonomously if you don't know which way north is? You can't. The aircraft doesn't see through its camera. We see through the camera, and we can make decisions based upon that. The aircraft does not have obstacle avoidance, doesn't have a brain to know which way is up or down if the IMU is messed up. So what you have to be aware of is, well, okay, keep it away from metallic objects and surfaces when you're taking off and landing. Don't take off out of the tailbed of a truck. Don't take off from concrete. Concrete has rebar underneath it. Rebar is iron. Iron can be magnetic pretty quickly. Granite, also a bad idea if you wanted to go out and fly at Enchanted Rock. Granite can be quite magnetic as well, and a lot of people don't know that. So, be aware of that. And right now we're about to go through one of our biggest things for our pre-flight. We're going to calibrate the compass. Super simple, it's free, it takes 15 seconds, and it's a free insurance policy. Because when you're sending up your aircraft and sitting at 1,000 feet away, you've potentially strapped your wallet to it. And if you're cool with your wallet being 1,500 feet away and not caring, never do a compass calibration. But if you are concerned about it, just do it. This is how simple it is. 5 times on our toggle switch there. The lights are yellow on the back of the craft and holding steady. All we have to do is this: grab an arm, walk it around 360 degrees until it turns green, hold it camera down 360 degrees around that until it blinks. That's it. You have no idea how many people call and say, my aircraft crashed, and I say, did you do a compass calibration? First and foremost, and they go, compass what? It's amazing. All right, how many GPS satellites do we have?
No, it's not. We're not seeing it.
Oh, just tap it, and it'll come back.
There. Oh, there.
8. All right, that's better than before.
Right.
So,
oh, good.
Now is my
8.
This is the last opportunity that we have to know if everything's okay. To arm our motors, because doing anything right now, it's not going to do anything. We have to arm the motors down and into the center. So now is our one opportunity before we go into the sky to listen. And you can listen to each motor independently. Easiest way, if I do this, it's actually the rear right motor. So if you want to actually see which motor is going on, your right control stick, you can check all your motors. Listen for bearings going out. Make sure all the props are spinning. If one of them isn't spinning, you know you've got a problem. This is also warming up the motors a little bit.
These tuned motors are quieter too, aren't they?
These are, yeah. These are the E300 motors. They are a bit quieter. So, I think everything's okay. I'm looking around. I've got very little obstacles that are new or that I'm not aware of. So, we're good to go. Thankfully, it's not very windy outside right now. If it were windy, I would want to point the aircraft into the wind, and as I lift off, I would want to actually go into the wind a little bit at the same time to counter that. But right now, we'll just go ahead and ascend. It's just going to be up. Just slowly throttle up, and then if you take your hands off the controls, the aircraft wants to stay where it is at all times. Now, it's going to drift a tiny bit. It's very normal. I mean, it's just accounting for a couple of different variables. Mostly all it's doing is fighting the wind. That's most of it. And that's the only thing it knows how to do. All it knows is that it wants to stay in the last place that I put it. That's it. In GPS mode, it wants to stay in the last place I put it. It thinks everything else is the wind. To the point that it thought that was the wind. And it just wants to go right back to where it was. Now, for your first flight, this is all we want to do. Let's not worry about our left stick where we're changing our yaw. Instead of using only our right stick, some altitude, and on your first flight, this is really, really good practice. Build a box. Just go in a square, and then we're going to build the same square over and over again by changing, skewing which way the aircraft is facing, but changing the route. So, build a simple box. Forward, right, back, and left. We'll get a little bit more altitude on it this time. So, we just built a box. Now, what happens with these systems and why people crash on their first flight sometimes is because when you change orientation, right now we know that we're facing that way. Red is to the front, green is to the back. We rotate by 90 degrees. If I hit forward, I'm not going that way, away from me. It's now changed 90 degrees to skew. So what we need to do, start thinking with portal. Just kidding. What we need to do is actually move the aircraft. Let's go ahead and build that box again. And we can cheat or we can do it the right way. So if left is forward, we'll do that. And forward is right. And right is back. And back is left. That's how we can do it. You can think about it and skew your mind to that, or you can just freaking cheat. How do you do it? Change your body by 90 degrees, and you've got it already. So, do that. Just go up. 3 times. Go up to your practice field or whatnot, or your backyard, and just do that. Build boxes, and I guarantee you, this one thing that you're doing right here will build your skill tremendously. And just rotate by 90 degrees. And then you'll become quite an effective collective pilot, where you can do really interesting stuff.
Yeah, you can move that.
Now the aircraft moves at a decent clip.
You know, lose Wi-Fi.
These little Phantoms will do about 35 miles per hour.
It can go pretty far.
But if you get a tailwind, you'll go much faster than that. You don't really want to take these out if it's going to be higher than 25 miles per hour wind speed on the ground, because every 20 feet that can be exponential. Every 100 feet that can be 100% exponential rise in. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're getting video feed, or we should be getting live video feed.
Yeah, it's right there.
Okay.
It's kind of. It'll get a little choppy.
It's 2.4, and these transformers really do mess with the visions on our property. That's why we're not going to spend too much time with this aircraft. We always move to the other because it has a much more powerful transmitter. But yes, the Wi-Fi signal, I've also got Wi-Fi turned on my phone, so that's probably causing it as well. It can be a little bit glitchy. The range on this system, the Phantom 2 Vision Plus, you should see video all the way out to about 2,000 feet before it breaks connection video-wise, and you should be able to fly half a mile. Now, one thing that can happen pretty quickly, let's say we were flying just while looking through the screen here, and we weren't really paying too close of an attention. We're doing that FPV flight. Where's the aircraft? You look up and you're like, oh, well, if you've got trees all around and whatnot, more than likely you're just hiding behind a tree. To test that, just head up, give yourself some altitude. Ah, there we are. But let's say that that's not the case. Let's say that we weren't really sure about it and we got way out there. And let's say that we do find it with our eyes again as well. But here's a big problem. You get so far out with this thing that's about the size of a chicken.
I can't tell forward or backwards.
And you tell me, after I do this, and I'm not even going to look at it, which way is the aircraft facing?
You don't know.
No freaking clue. You have a couple. Oh yeah, if you're going through your FPV, you'll know. But right now, just looking at the aircraft, I have no indicator, no bearing knowing which way the aircraft is facing. This gives us two possible things that we can do right now. We can either say, I suck, I'm turning off the remote, let the aircraft come home and not take charge of it, or you have an opportunity to learn a little bit of something right now. So when an aircraft is moving in the sky, left and right, it's not going to get you any closer to home, right? So one thing to know is, as an aircraft is approaching, so long as you are underneath the aircraft, if it's going to be approaching you, it'll be rising in the sky. And if it's going away from you, it will be lowering in the sky. So we want to pick either forward or back real quick and say, okay, which way is forward relative to where I am right now? It's to the right. Okay, so we're going to rotate about 2 seconds quick. 1, 2. And that should bring us just around, let's see here. Okay, we're descending in the sky, means if I go backwards, I should start ascending in the sky and coming back this way.
Yep, it is.
We can make some corrections there on our approach. And that's one way to get it back. Or let's take it back out there. And let's show you what's one of the most interesting features, one of the things that truly gives that autonomous, or rather unmanned, autonomous, blah, blah, blah. My brain just reset, sorry. One of the most interesting features that makes these a drone rather than an RC aircraft that's just brainless. Now, what we can do, we've lost the aircraft. Let's say it's behind a tree or something. Before you ever want to do this, you want to give yourself some altitude. We can find out what altitude that we're at right here by doing a click on the screen. We are 817 feet away, 115 feet off the ground, roughly. The way that the aircraft senses altitude has nothing to do with GPS or the compass. There's a barometric altimeter, which is a little pressure sensor inside the aircraft, and all it does is when it's on the ground, when we let it warm up and the lights are blinking yellow, it's saying, okay, this barometric pressure is now my 0, and I'm going to base everything on this. Now, if we're out here and we were flying for a couple hours, putting new batteries in and whatnot, and a cold front blew through and there was a change in barometric pressure, the aircraft might think it's either higher or lower than where it is, depending on what type of pressure change it is. So be aware of that. That's a weird thing that can happen. But anyway, I lost my aircraft. My altitude says I'm 115 feet off the ground. Important to know. If I turn off this controller to enable the return to home mode, one of two things is going to happen. If I'm below 60 feet, it's only going to rise to 60 feet before it comes home. Which means if there's a 75-foot obstacle in the way between here and there, smash. If there's not, and we're above 60 feet, like right now I'm at 100, it will maintain that present altitude on its way home. Now, we might not let it land all the way unless it gets really good and accurate for us here, because I don't want it falling off of the sides here. It's only accurate to about 2.3 meters in diameter, which is going to be roughly an 8-foot circle, and that can mean on the grass, in the tires, or on the plank. We'll see what happens. So, remember how I was telling you, make sure this is the last thing you ever turn off? That's because if the aircraft motors are armed, even if it's on the ground and the motors are just spinning slow, you cut this off and you go to pick it up and put your face above it, your face is now a part of a prop. So don't do that. But what we can do to activate failsafe is just that. Turn off your controller for about 10 seconds. You're going to see on the screen, it's going to say, coming home. Mm-hmm.
So does that work if you don't have GPS lock?
No,
yeah,
it does not.
I thought that's another important reason.
Make sure you've got enough GPS satellites that you're connected to.
And that's only with ones that have
before
GPS.
You do that. And so now that 10 seconds has roughly gone by, I'm going to turn my controller back on just because I want to be prepared to take control of the aircraft should I need to. But right now, this is all completely autonomous.
Okay.
Oh, fantastic. A lot. Oh. And it's not going to be 100% accurate today. But I might actually go ahead and land right here so long as it doesn't want to get confused with the cable. We'll see what happens.
So it's doing all this on its own?
This is all on its own. In order for me to take control, I can toggle the switch at any time. And I might, depending on how close it gets to the table here. We'll see if it'll do it. It seems like it did a good job. A couple of feet off from where it was, but you know what? Getting it that close back to where you were, as opposed to what could be worse. It could be worse. So, that's that with this particular aircraft. Like I said, this is the last thing off. So you want to go ahead and turn off the battery, just double press, and then cut this guy off, and you're good. Questions?
Well, I was going to say, to flip the S1 switch, I guess it's the S1 switch, just a few times to get back manual control.
Yeah, just